Welcome back to Collaborate Forever, episode 4. We had the chance to speak with Francesca Hong, Madison native. She is a chef and politician. We talked about her background in the food industry here in Madison, ultimately ending up becoming the chef and owner of her own shop, Morris Ramen on King Street. We spoke about her pandemic pivots and how she leveraged her background as a community organizer into winning a seat on the Wisconsin State Legislature. Enjoy.
Hi, this is Francesca Hong, State Representative for the 76th District here in Madison, Wisconsin, as well as the chef and owner of Morris Ramen.
So we are on the grounds of the Wisconsin State Capitol with Francesca Hong. This is episode 4 of Collaborate Forever. Scott and I spent quite a bit of time sort of organizing and orchestrating not only the podcast. Thank you for joining us. This took a little bit of work on both of our parts.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I think I just want to just sort of set the scene. Yeah, the Wisconsin State Capitol grounds are gorgeous. The building behind us, or it's not quite behind us, about 105 years old. I think it was built in 1917. And this is like the third iteration of the building. There's been like a couple burn downs and other issues, but it's a gorgeous building. It stands about 280 feet tall, and it's the highest building in the city, right? That's sort of, it's been legislated.
It is.
Nothing can be built taller, right?
It is. Everyone's got to have a view of the Capitol, which belongs to the people, by the way.
Yeah, that has been challenged. Like, I know that the library down in the mall got close. They had to take a floor.
It did, and there's development happening all around the square and the isthmus all the time, and it's definitely one of the guidelines that everyone has to follow. And I believe our state capitol is one of the tallest in the nation, only to the national capitol.
I think that's correct. I think the national capitol just has more volume, or they're very close. But anyway, so we're outside. This is part of our podcast. We try and get outside or in the elements as much as we can. Today we've done it again. There is lawnmowers in the background. They're doing groundskeeping, and but the grounds are beautiful, so well served. You were mentioning off camera that there is sort of a garden off of your right shoulder, so
yes.
Kind of to the back right corner of the frame here. Can you kind of take us through that?
We are by the King Street entrance of the Capitol, so this is the east side, and behind me is what Chef Yusuf bin Rala and I planted in early June, the BIPOC African Diaspora Garden. And so he actually brought seeds and seedlings, and we then transplanted a lot of those plants into this community garden. There's okra, collard greens, bok choy, red corn, just a lot of other produce that we can't wait to get out to community members. We've already done a couple harvests, and we'll be coordinating some more in the coming weeks.
Nice. So right now it's probably kind of the peak of that garden.
Oh, absolutely.
We're in the second week of August right now.
Yeah,
okay.
Second week of August. It is absolutely thriving. Some of it is overgrowing right now, so we're having trouble keeping up. So we're asking community folks to help, and if you'd like to take a squash, you're absolutely welcome to.
Nice. And further in the background there, we're looking down King Street, okay? So can you tell us a little bit about the importance of King Street to you?
King Street has probably one of the most special places in my heart. It is where I've worked for the past 15 years, and it's where we have our restaurant, Morris Ramen. 106 King Street, I used to work next to it as well. It's where I had my first executive chef job, and now my office can almost, in the Capitol, can look out onto King Street as well. And so it's been my home. It's where I felt I've belonged, and it's where I've spent a lot of time, both in heartache and in celebration.
You are the first guest that we've had with their own Wikipedia page.
Oh, fun thing about that Wikipedia page is that it does not give my actual birth date. It says that
it was a range.
Yeah. I thought that was very generous of them.
Right. Interesting things is occupation, and we're going to dive into both of them today, but chef and politician. That is really unique. So let's just start real quick, kind of set the stage here. We've got cicadas overhead. It's great. We've set the stage where we're at, but let's talk about you. You're a Madison native?
I am. I am the proud daughter of Korean immigrants. My parents came here in the late 80s. I was born and raised in Eagle Heights, which is on the near west side of Madison. Came up through the Madison Public Schools. Shout out to Shorewood, Hamilton, and Madison West High School.
Nice. I'm a West grad.
Yes,
yeah,
go
Regents.
Yeah. And yeah, I got as far as St. Paul, did a short stint at Macalester College, and then, did the needing to find myself. So traveled to Costa Rica, worked on cacao farms, doing research with sloths and harvesting cacao, and then came back and did a year and a half at UW-Madison and convinced myself that I was going to go into sports journalism. I wanted to be an anchor on ESPN. I wanted to anchor Sports Center, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. Throughout all of my time at UW, I was working in restaurants. And, I realized I was happiest when I was working in a restaurant. I think hospitality really, it centers care, and it teaches people how to not center yourself in that care. And working with my hands, I jumped on the line one day because a salad guy didn't show up for his garde manger shift. And I jumped on the line, and when I started working in the kitchen, I felt like it was even more a place I belonged. So ended up dropping out of UW-Madison and cooking full-time, and worked with amazing mentors throughout the community, mostly in downtown restaurants, and worked my way up to pastry chef, sous chef, and then executive chef at a restaurant called 43 North. And I think at the time I was the youngest female chef in the city. And then in 2016, with my partner, we had a couple of babies. My son was born, and we opened a restaurant called Morris Ramen.
Interesting. Pivot real quick back to college. You left knowing you had a path that you felt confident in, correct? And it was, you were working on journalism up until that point, and then you just made the pivot. Do you remember? I mean, has food and I guess being in hospitality, has that sort of something you grew up with? Or, I mean, where did that come from? Or was it just like the travels sort of brought that out and you're like, I'm going to leave the UW in journalism and my aspirations of going to ESPN and doing this?
So I always enjoyed cooking, and at home I remember cooking Thanksgiving meals and cooking for, different organizations. My biggest endeavor was I cooked for a group of 100 at Christmas time through my parents' church. And I always just felt like it was a way to, I didn't have to explain myself in cooking. Food is such a beautiful universal language, and it was, I think, just that not having to explain myself and kind of navigating different spaces and not always feeling like myself. Food was a way where I didn't have to really talk about that or deal with it. It made sense. So I always knew I loved it, but I didn't think it could be a career. And until I started working in restaurants and seeing that, folks had made it a career, and it was a place that really brought so many different types of people together. And I think it was where I saw myself, learning more about compassion and empathy, and I wasn't getting that in school. I was a little bit older than some of the other students as well. I had to take some of those kind of entry-level classes, and I was a couple years out of high school, so I didn't want to be in a space that reinforced that I felt different. I had kind of dealt with that being in primarily white spaces as a woman of color. Even in Madison, which has a growing diverse population, there are, we're not always creating spaces that are really conducive to people of color. So with food, I think it was a way to communicate and heal and feel things without having to explain it so much.
Can you just bring us through your restaurant resume at when you made that break? How many different places were you at before we ended up at Morris in 2016?
Yeah, so La Brioche True Food on University, it's still there, is where I got my start.
Yeah, I love True Food.
Yeah, so that was, I think they still have the spinach salad with the Basque pear and the candied pecans.
They do.
That's where, I worked brunch expoing there and to just see a small restaurant like that put out so many plates, and the collaboration and the teamwork that the kitchen had to have. If you didn't have that discipline, you couldn't have a successful service. I loved that organized chaos, right? Because no matter how prepared you had to be, there was always a variable of people that you couldn't control. And I think that challenge was always exhilarating for me. It still is. And then I worked at Brasserie V, making the famous turkey sandwiches with the avocado. And then once I left school, I was working at Restaurant Magnus, La Brioche, and I think Brasserie V simultaneously. And then helped Chef Tori Miller open Gray's. I was on the opening team of Gray's. And then I think it was Gray's and Magnus and Brasserie V at the same time. I left La Brioche, and then the chef at 43 North kind of asked me if I would come on and help him open his restaurant, and I felt like that would be my first fine dining restaurant, and it was an experience I hadn't had yet, and I wanted to know what kind of that brigade system was. But it wasn't too much of a brigade system. It really was more of a collaborative kitchen team, and I was fortunate to see what kind of more contemporary cuisine and contemporary food looked like at the time. And then, that was 43 North was where I really just worked my way up. I also worked after 43 North at Restaurant Muramoto, slinging miso black cods and helping out the sushi line. And that's where I met my partner, who was the sushi chef at the time. And actually, I should backtrack. He and I met at Maduro, which is right next door to my restaurant, Morris Ramen. And in 2016, we opened the restaurant with our partner, Shinji Morimoto, and we really wanted to bring kind of a neighborhood noodle shop that focused on, high quality ingredients, authentic techniques, but Midwestern kind of hospitality and just soul nourishing food. And it was really important to us that our restaurant create a sense of community, and I think ramen kind of has a magical power to do that.
It does, yeah. So True Food was like what year abouts when your first foray into
so that would have been 2009, 2010. Yeah, it was the year they opened. And so, I saw a lot of restaurant openings, which helped me with opening mine. So the opening of True Food, I was on the opening team there.
Brasserie.
Brasserie had been around for a little bit.
But they're newer.
Yeah, Gray's opening. I mean, that was the scale, and they were doing breakfast then too. So it was, I got to work 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. some days, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't recommend it now, but I couldn't believe I was being paid to learn so much.
Yeah, that's such a good attitude. It's such a good attitude. Well, okay, let's just round up and say 2010 to 2016. That is an impressive resume. I mean, you went through like some of the hallmark food establishments here in town in 6 years, so to end up opening your own shop. So congratulations, that's great.
Thank you. I mean, Madison has such an amazing food scene. I know we have more restaurants per capita than any other city in the nation, which, has both of its challenges, but allows kind of, I think, maybe post-pandemic more so, less of a competitive atmosphere and more of a collaborative one. And I know folks are going to have things to say about that, but we faced a labor shortage because of how many restaurants were in this town before the pandemic, and I think right now we're realizing that in order to have a thriving and really healthy, sustainable restaurant industry, we really do have to look at what kind of working environments we're creating for the workers, as well as restaurant owners and chefs. Like, we have, I think, a bigger responsibility to the community than we realize.
Yeah, that's a great place, I think, to pivot into sort of your work in the service industry and bringing awareness to it. We spoke with Matt Danke on episode 2 of El Grito, and he brought up the same thing. It's coming to light, and it's due time that we are where we are today. Did the pandemic help bring focus to that issue? And I guess more to a little bit, I know that your efforts predate the pandemic. You started initiative, the CLC, the Culinary Ladies Collective. That was like, 2016, 17, 18-ish?
2016,
Okay.
It was in response to the election.
Okay.
Where we felt that spaces where underrepresented people could really, uplift one another, affirm one another's talents and concerns and challenges, and work together to do good for the community. The fact that some of us felt very helpless after that election, and to come together and be empowered by sharing stories. I mean, to come to in space and say, hey, I remember on the line when, I was harassed, or I remember, just always being the only in a kitchen, or, hey, I actually had a really great experience and never really felt a lot of the harassment that other people are talking about, but it's good for me to know about it. Just a place to share stories, and then again, compile and really work together to be like, we can raise $30,000 for Planned Parenthood selling cookie boxes. We can bring awareness to how do we have better practices in restaurants and really start changing the work culture. I think all of that just, it's unfortunate that it took, an election like 2016 to get us to start really working together. But I think in times of tragedy, when people are grieving, we're actually capable of a lot, and I'm incredibly grateful to the women and non-binary folks in the Culinary Ladies Collective who continue to, realize that we can do so much more when we work together.
Can you fill us in on a couple of your other initiatives too? I know Cook It Forward is on pause now, but can you kind of just fill us in on your involvement with that?
Yeah, so Cook It Forward is another example of, a comprehensive response to what I saw is kind of a lack of an imagination and some failed leadership when it comes to addressing, food insecurity that was exacerbated by the pandemic, as well as small businesses that were struggling, especially restaurants, because they really couldn't face. Restaurants were struggling as many other small businesses were, but restaurants especially because we were shut down. Josh Berkson from Rule Number 1 Hospitality approached us when we turned into a community kitchen, because when we received the PPP loans from Morris, we realized we needed to figure out a way to pivot to ensure that all of our workers could come back. And in order to do that, we had to retrain some front of the house folks to realize that, hey, why don't we pack meals for those in the community if we can't be open right now until we figure out how we can be open, because we were still kind of trying to get delivery and carry out implemented because we had done none of that before. So yeah, Cook It Forward is an initiative that aimed to work collaboratively with last mile delivery drivers to ensure that healthy meals created in restaurants to get to community members that were underserved. So we enlisted and worked with Alnisa Allgood from Collab for Good, who is a phenomenal community leader who helped us really find that last mile network, and those who were working on a grassroots level to make sure that resources, whether they be mental health resources or, who were very committed to mutual aid work, that we could get those meals to them and that they would get to the hands of those who needed it. I think a lot of the times, the demand side of food insecurity work is not always centered, and we really wanted to make sure that the restaurants creating these meals were getting to folks who were already working with neighborhood last mile delivery drivers to kind of work in this mutual aid network. We had, 7-8 restaurants come on. We were able to fundraise over $225,000. We paid restaurants $10 a meal for the meals. And then we also were able to pay the last mile delivery network so that it was a sustainable effort, and we were paying each person along the way to ensure that meals got to those who needed it.
Was this your sort of brainchild, or is it just
so it was a collaborative effort with Josh Berkson at Rule Number 1, and then Alnisa, who really, when we were figuring out the fiscal model for this, how do we ensure that we're actually practicing equity and not necessarily just using the words as a way to market. And in order to do that, we really had to think about, the cost of the meals weren't just the $10 that were going to the restaurant. It was important that we paid the Black and brown women that we were working with to make sure that who knew how to get these meals to the folks that needed it, right? We needed to make sure that Alnisa and Collab for Good, who were doing a lot of the communication infrastructure and the coordination, was compensated as well. And so the price of a meal, there was some back and forth on it, but we realized that these aren't inherently costs that are included in just the price of the meal. These are things that we have to consider to make sure that it's equitable and sustainable. If we hadn't collaborated with her and really had been intentional about how these meals would be distributed and where and how we came to those decisions, it needed to be a collaborative effort. And so I would say everyone brought a different talent and voice to cook it forward. We took a community kitchen model of restaurants, being able to package and distribute meals, working with community members to figure out where they would go, and obviously there's the fiscal and fundraising part that we had to do as well. And so it was definitely a team effort, and I would say Josh, Alnisa, and I were some of the biggest players, along with all of the restaurants who chose to participate, and then even when we were slowing down in fundraising, then decided that they wanted to continue at a lower cost per meal or donated meals.
Sure. Again, what was the time frame for that? When did it start?
We launched in June of 2020, and our final meals went out in June of 2021.
Yeah, see, that's the point. I mean, you did that, which is in of itself incredible. I mean, it's so complex. There's so many moving parts with it and forward thinking. But then let's talk, you still had a shop to run. So can you just, just get us up to speed on, let's just say March of 2020 to now? I mean.
So March of 2020 is when my organizing cap, I was wearing that for most of the time. I think other restaurant owners and chefs and restaurant industry workers, when a lot of people shut down, there was just this panic of how are we going to survive. I was first and foremost just trying to figure out the unemployment system to ensure that our workers could get compensated during the pandemic. We were trying to figure out, virtual tip jars were going around, but we needed advocacy, and we needed advocacy from government officials. And so in order to do that and to be heard, we needed to make sure that we were organized in that effort and that we had strong messaging. And so I worked with different restaurant owners to write a letter to the governor and call on our elected officials to make sure that restaurants were left out when it came to pandemic funding, and that restaurants were, especially the locally owned small restaurants, are such a heartbeat for the local economy, and that mostly everything that comes into our restaurants goes right back out to our local economy. While I was doing that, I did most of that while I was kind of just grieving for not knowing what was going to happen to the restaurant. And I have an amazing team of workers and that have been with us from the beginning, who really trusted that we were going to get through this. And when they saw our calls to action, they jumped on. They realized that we deserved to survive. And I think when we got that first initial PPP loan, and I said, let's keep, because I should backtrack. When we first shut down, we had all this food, right? And we knew that we needed to get it out to folks because a lot of the inequities were going to get exacerbated, and we were already seeing that kind of happening. So when I saw the team come together and able to package food and enlist mutual aid networks, I realized that our restaurant could be used as a space to continue to do that. And so that community kitchen effort, I think, is what actually motivated me to keep fighting for funding for restaurants and for relief. And the Independent Restaurant Coalition was coordinating on a national level. The Milwaukee Independent Restaurant Coalition was coordinating on a state level. And so, that's when all of a sudden I'm in front of meetings with Tammy Baldwin and Representative Pocan and Senator Johnson, and just saying, hey, we can help you. If you help us, we can help a lot of the community in different ways, because look, we're already being a community kitchen here. Look, restaurants across the state are already helping to feed people and raise money and have their restaurants be places where folks can coordinate mutual aid efforts. And so my restaurant kind of ran with me in a way to really figure out how to pivot and adapt and figure out how to get through the pandemic. I think because we've always invested so much in people, and I'm incredibly proud that a lot of our staff are people who are the ones who opened with us, so they've been around for 5 years. They knew how to help me when I didn't know how to lead the restaurant, because it wasn't a restaurant anymore. And they really helped. They showed light when I really only saw darkness. And I think that sounds vague and metaphorical, but it really was just like I would sit in the dark in the restaurant, like not knowing what to do because we couldn't have people in there. And our management team, our cooks and our servers would say, hey, we're going to be okay. Thanks for helping us out. We're going to help you out too. We're going to get through this together. I think I knew that it was only going to work if I allowed myself to get help. That's what the staff did. And so, the restaurant went from community kitchen to opening for just carry out and delivery, and still being a community kitchen and doing cook it forward meals. And you saw people kind of come out and take on leadership positions managing cook it forward meals, because packaging 200 meals a week while still operating, carry out and delivery when we had never done carry out before. Everyone took risks. Everyone realized they had to take on responsibilities they didn't have before, and that when you're vulnerable, when you need to talk about what your boundaries are, we were communicating in ways that we had never communicated before. And I think it has made us stronger, and it's really the only reason why the restaurant is still going is that the people who kept it going allowed me to do things like run for office, to keep fighting for restaurants and keep, looking for money. Yeah.
I think this is probably a great place to talk about the second occupation on your Wikipedia page, which is politician. Before we begin, we spent a little bit of the show here talking about, I think, your roots in the industry and in the service industry, and obviously you've expressed a great amount of gratitude and empathy to the people in this industry. In 2020 November, you won the 76th seat in the Wisconsin State Legislature. Congrats. So you soundly beat your opponent a lot. It's a big margin, right? And now you sit at the seat of the 76, which runs from, roughly, those of you who don't know, Edgewood College on the south, kind of part of the city proper, all the way up to the airport, METC area. Demographics here are largely white, correct?
A little over 80%.
A little over 80%, wow. Was your move into politics a function of the 45th president, or your need to bring awareness to, structural reform? Or is it kind of a mix?
It's a mix. I think those are two important factors. Really, I think progressive working class voices is the voice for more people, more than just progressive working class. I think our ideologies, our policies of wanting to dismantle structural racism and the need to push for policies that bring economic agency and security for all is actually, they're policies that actually work for everyone. I think being a small business owner, being an Asian American and a woman of color, being a mom, being an organizer, I don't think politicians need to be defined by just one identity, and because people aren't defined by just one identity. And so yes, 45's election and the pandemic, grieving and wanting to have more representation in the legislature are all really big factors in what propelled me to run. But I think in the end it was just, I knew that a voice that wasn't just about one voice was the most important thing we needed in there. And
And you brought it all.
Yeah, well, and I ran really on the platform of care and preserving humanity, and people were like, "What does that mean?" And I was like,
"Well, it's what you've been doing."
Yeah, it's
an extension, right?
It's an extension of what I've been doing, and really who the people I represent are. Even when I can't be caring, and even when I don't believe in humanity, I know that the people I represent do. And I think it's so important for people who are holding office, knowing that holding that office means you're holding a megaphone for everyone else. Yes, I ran as a cause. Yes, I had to talk about myself and sell myself as in the campaign, but really we use the phrase sharing the table, because I don't think it's enough to just have a seat at the table, and I don't think it's enough to have a decision-making seat at the table. I think we need to make sure that folks at the table know that we need to uproot it and take it to the places where there are voices who have never been heard before. And that's a challenge, and that's something that I truly believe in, and I know that I can't achieve on my own. And when I'm in there literally banging my head on the marble because I work with obstructionists, essentially almost fascist at times, I know that this building doesn't belong to me or any of them. It belongs to everyone who voted and everyone who deserves to vote.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. The 76 has interesting history. You were after, I don't know, succeeded? I don't know, whatever it is. Chris Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I have been friends with her for a while, and
she's
so
phenomenal.
She moved on to the Supreme Court.
She is in the circuit court.
Circuit court.
We are hoping she runs for Supreme Court Justice.
I was jumping ahead. Yes, she will. But yeah, circuit court. And then actually, I was looking back at like some of the winners of '76. It was largely female, which is interesting. There was like one guy from like the '70s. I don't know how he fit in, but it was like mostly female. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I mean, this district has changed a little bit. Yeah. But Joe Parisi held office in or near the 76, I believe. Representative Pocan did. Tammy Baldwin did.
Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. So, and then again, I know we're trying to like keep it a little bit shorter, but you can cut this up. But I'm just curious. So, like, at what point? When did you think in your brain like, oh, I'm totally gonna run? I mean, like, can you give me a date?
No.
Was it literally when 45 came into be? I mean, I know you were already busy doing...
Oh, no. I had no intention of running for office until after the pandemic.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's where I want to get on here, because I think people would be pretty curious about that. That's a pandemic pivot.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Very good. You know, we like to end our episodes basically opening the doors. It's your platform. If you have any calls to action, anything you want to say, it's also an opportunity for you to like make big announcements. Like Matt on the last episode announced for the first time really that he's going to be opening a new space down in Cooksville, Wisconsin. And that was pretty cool. So I mean,
that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So and so like we're wondering here if like, you know, I mean, are you gonna announce like right here that in like 2032 that you're gonna be running for president? I mean, do you want to drop that now? Because you can literally put the flag in and be like 2020. I called my shot. I mean, just so you know, the last politician that I spoke with that I chatted up went on to become president.
Wow.
So you're number 2. Yeah.
Who was that?
Number 42, Bill Clinton.
Wow.
Right over there, actually, right on the other side of that Suburban. I chatted him up, and he went on to become president. So, 2032, obviously you can't do the next one because we got an incumbent. Keep it in mind. No, but anyway, it's your platform. Like anything, calls to action, something that you want to say that, you know, kind of like a parting shot, if you will. Your website. Let's just go through the basics. Like, let's point. Like, people need to know like where to go. I was looking at your website. It's nice. I like your blog.
Oh, thank you.
You let it fly on the blog. The blog is raw. You're dropping it on there. I like that.
Yes.
So people go check out the blog.
Folks, check me out on Twitter @StateRepHong. Also at Francesca Hong WI. I encourage folks to check out if you have any legislative policy questions or concerns or comments. Feel free to email me rep.hong@legis.wisconsin.gov. And I think, my parting message is leadership is important. Unapologetic and humble leadership is even more important. And I think coming out of these past couple years, I want folks to know that they can be engaged and be a leader in so many different ways and at so many different levels. And for folks who are interested or trying to figure out if they should be involved in politics or not, we're involved in politics every day. It really is a part of all of our lives, whether we want it to be or not. And right now, engagement, especially at the local level, is so important in order for us to continue to become stronger as a community, as a city, as a state, and as a country. And I think it starts very much at a community local level, and it starts with leadership that is truly caring about other people's ability to thrive and have agency. And the more leaders we can have who truly care about their neighbors, I think it's what we need to stay engaged and continue to not feel helpless, because we got a lot of problems, we got a lot of shit going on in the world, and honestly, what's going to solve it are folks willing to be bold and unapologetic in leadership, and then caring when it comes to community.
Sounds good. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm Adam Senatori, and Scott is working the audio, and we are on the Capitol grounds this afternoon with chef and politician Francesca Hong. That's all for today. Thanks for listening. Be sure to visit collaborateforever.com for episode news, upcoming drops, and to sign up for our newsletter. Also check us out on social media, Collaborate Forever across all platforms. See ya.